the feast of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. Saint Bernard, one of the great saints of the 1100s, one of the great reformers in the history of the Catholic Church. And it's good to be back here again in Dagohoy, in Behold. And we remember in this Mass also, in a special way, remember this Mass for Romeo, and this Mass for the soul of Romeo, under the commandments, under those commandments. St. Bernard was one of the great defenders of the Catholic faith, one of the great reformers of the Church, and he founded the monastery, brought many into the monastery of Citeaux in France, dragged many soldiers, even his own father, and many into the army of God. And he used to say that if you are not loving God, if you're not adoring God, if you are not with God, you are not yourself. Those that are not with God are not themselves. And so he used to go to the soldiers and he would go to the people and say, you need to become a monk. You need to become a priest. And oh, that's not me. That's not me. You need to leave the life of the worldliness of the modern world. But that's not me. That's not me. Then he would say, come, be yourself. For it says in the parable of the prodigal son, that the prodigal son, remember, he went away from God. And the prodigal son lived and ate with the swine. And he lost all of his money. And he was starving. And he had committed every manner of sin and had gone down to live with the pigs, to live with the swine. And it says in the Gospel of St. Luke, and he came to himself. A passage St. Bernard would quote many times. And he came to himself. And he remembered his Father's house. We are now, right now, in a time where the whole world is living with the swine. All the people in the Philippines, and the people in China, and the people in America, and the people in South America, and the people in Europe, and the people in Africa, and the people throughout the entire world are more and more and more living with the swine. Just like the prodigal son. They sought after what the world has to offer. Money, pleasure of sex, drugs, the pleasures of this world, all the different things that money can buy, and they are discovering that it is making them empty. And so many are committing suicide, and they are starving. We are in a world in which there are more fat people than there have ever been, and yet a world in which more souls are starving. There is a great famine in our land. And that's what it says in the parable of the prodigal son. There was a great famine. There was a great starvation. The starvation of the soul without God. The emptiness of the soul without virtue. The emptiness of the mind without truth. The emptiness of the heart without love. The emptiness of the passions without anything to really go after and desire. So there is emptiness all over our world. And there is famine everywhere. They eat food, but they are starving on the inside. And this is the famine that our Lord spoke of in the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 10. Or chapter on the prodigal son, chapter 15. Chapter 15. And that when he spoke about that, the prodigal son, he was in a great famine. And St. Bernard says, come to yourself. Remember where you came from. We came from Our Lady. We came from the creation of God, from the hand of God, and we must return to God. That is what we must do. Go back to God. And that means a true faith. And that means a true Mass. And that means living in the state of grace. And that means saying the Rosary. It means living the supernatural life. That is what we need. And souls are more and more and more turning away from God just to try to survive for a short time in this world. And then after that very short time, what happens? They die in emptiness and go to the place of eternal despair. And so St. Bernard said, come, be yourself. Return to your true home, which is our Holy Church and the life of grace. Return to your true home. That's what we have to do. We must love God with all our hearts, return to our true home, and stay faithful in our faith. Stay faithful in our faith. And remember that in this present battle against modernism, we cannot compromise with the world. We cannot compromise with the modern world. We reject the errors of the modern world which are leading souls to hell. These are the errors of Vatican II. The errors and evil of the new Mass. The errors and evil of all the fruits of that new Mass, which is the wiping out of families. The wiping out of our civilization. No more children. No more babies. Man just telling me on the boat today, he's the head of a school, and how each year he has a small school of 200, and then it was at 184, and the next year it was 160, the next year 132, this year 114, and next year he will be under 100 because of family planning. And all of the small barangay schools, they're all getting smaller, and the children are less. And he says, he's talking to the people and saying, do you not see your future? The future is death. This is famine. We have the famine of children, the famine of virtue, the famine of truth. We are in a world of starvation, supernatural starvation, and it's dying. The only way to bring an end to that death is to bring back this true Mass, to bring back the true faith, the old church before Vatican II, to bring back the large family, children and children. This is the future. The rosary and the family. We must bring these things back. And we are finding our own people beginning to struggle with these truths. And they are tired of fighting the modern world. Tired of fighting modernism. Tired of fighting Vatican II. And so the Bishop Clay says, let's just be approved. And Bishop Williamson says, just do whatever you think strengthens your heart. And Pope Francis says that anything you do is fine. But we don't have to follow the gospel anymore. We do have to follow the gospel. We do have to stay with the gospel. And this is something that has changed in the modern church. We have to stay away from the lies of the modern church and stay with the truth of the gospel. We will bring the world back to Christ by listening to St. Bernard's great dictum, his great saying, come, be yourself. Whoever is himself is with God. Whoever is with himself is a child of Mary. Whoever is with himself is away from sin. Whoever is with himself is in the Holy Roman Catholic faith. Whoever is with himself lives in grace. Then they are themselves. And when we go away from grace and go away from faith, we become empty and in a state of starvation and famine. So let's stay away from that state of starvation. Remain firm in the faith and eat, drink, and love our holy faith. And stand firm by it. For those that God bless you all. And the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost.